Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson are the clear-cut top-tier fantasy quarterbacks, but they're going to cost you a pretty penny. There are better values at the quarterback position later in the draft. We go tier by tier and talk through our quarterback rankings for the 2024 season on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com. A special welcome to our newest listeners here as we get you ready for your 2024 fantasy football drafts.
Yeah, listen, most drafts are probably coming up this weekend or the weekend after that. So we're here to get you prepared. And we have a great week because we're going through all of our positional rankings. We're going to start today with our quarterback rankings, going tier by tier, going through all the top 20 to 25 guys that are fantasy relevant this year. Before we jump into it, I want to remind everybody that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, jumping right into the top of our quarterback rankings, Vinny. We both have the same tier one, and it's Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. For me, for you, it's Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. There's not a ton to add about these guys. I mean, Hurts and Allen have just been scoring machines over the last 2 years. I mean, they're the clear-cut guys that have the rushing upside as well. And then Lamar last year, even in it seemed like a bad year, he ends up winning MVP. He's the quarterback 3 in points per game. And I feel like he didn't even touch close to his ceiling. So those 3 guys, easily the top 3 for me in terms of my rankings.
Yeah, just a preference where you're going. And look, we can't tell you for sure how that's going to be in terms of order of finish between those 3 guys, but Josh Allen has been consistently 1 or 2. Jalen Hurts has had a 1 finish. Lamar Jackson can do that as well. So all these guys have potential to be the highest scoring quarterback on the board. And they've got that running boost as well on top of a really good productive passing. So that's why they're in a group by themselves. They've got the cheat code. They've got the numbers overall. They've got the history and a lot of just trust in these guys that they're going to come through. That's why they separate themselves. Now, it gets a little tricky, and we are bold on the show. That's what I will say, is that we don't just follow what everyone else is doing here, because there's a lot of rankings that make us scratch our heads. In tier 2, we have an interesting contrast, I will say. There's some, but really what we're looking at, I've got Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, Jayden Daniels, and that's kind of it. That's like the next wave of running quarterbacks. You've got Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Anthony Richardson, and Jayden Daniels. So one thing, let's just start with what we agree on here, is that because you just look at these guys, they can kind of be the poor man's version of what we have with Allen, Hurts, and Jackson in terms of their production kind of dual threat, right? I mean, this is why you kind of have to separate them. That's how I kind of did it in my head as well, I think. But we need to talk about your outlier of Dak Prescott too.
Yeah, so I was shocked. You have Dak Prescott a lot lower than I do. I am at 6 here. Quarterback 5. I have him at quarterback 5. I do have Kyler Murray at 4, but they're in the same tier. You have him all the way at quarterback 11 in your tier 3 quarterbacks. I'm shocked by that because of how consistently good Dak Prescott has been, especially, I mean, last year we saw him be the quarterback 4, right, on the season. Quarterback 1 from week 6 through 18. He had 7 top 4 quarterback finishes during the year last year. And he's been a top 4 quarterback in points per game in 3 of the last 5 seasons. He has the same system with Mike McCarthy. I mean, unless you're expecting CeeDee Lamb not to play the full season, how do you have him so low? What's the reasoning for your quarterback 11 ranking for Dak?
Well, it's simple. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring in front of him, and his numbers could be similar, but I think everything has to line up well. I mean, keep in mind there were some things that didn't happen. Joe Burrow was not himself. You had Anthony Richardson, a guy that we ranked pretty high. He got hurt and was not available to consistently put up points either. So there was a couple guys that could squeeze him down. I think there's a higher trajectory now for CJ Stroud. But I think these are pretty close. I think this is why I have a pretty big tier 3. I'll admit I have from 7 to 13. So I think a lot of these guys are similar. It kind of tells you that there's really good value here in the draft. And if these tiers are similar, then I want to wait for Dak Prescott. Now, I think he'll go earlier in some drafts, but I think a lot of these guys there that are outside of the top 6 are really kind of similar, and you could see any of these guys jumping into the tier 2 with their production. So Dak, it's not more so that I don't like Dak. I just like a few other guys a little bit more. One of those guys we both love here, and you like him a little less. You have him behind Dak Prescott, but this is definitely more aggressive than the market. Jayden Daniels. I have him at 6. You have him at 7. Are we crazy? Are we going too overhyping? By the way, as we're recording this, he was officially named the Washington Commanders starter.
No, I really don't think we're overhyping it. I mean, we saw what a good rushing quarterback he was last year in college. He led all FBS quarterbacks with over 1,100 rushing yards, averaged 8.4 yards per carry. Like last year, the top 3 fantasy quarterbacks were 3 of the 4 quarterbacks that had 500 plus rushing yards last year. Allen, Hurts, and Lamar. The other one was Justin Fields. He was a little bit lower there, but he's also just explosive with his arm. He's great with those deep throws. Like he's going to come down with some deep passes, those chunk plays, and then also so many rushing yards. I can't imagine he doesn't get 500 plus rushing yards. I would imagine 700 plus, right? So that's why I have him pretty safely as a top 7 guy. I might be too low on him.
Yeah, he's going to score a lot of touchdowns, by the way. I mean, they're using him early. If you look at some of the preseason work, I mean, I don't think he even needed really the preseason. It was just like, here's some highlights you want to add just to make sure that I'm the starting quarterback. But he was running, he was making it look easy throwing downfield. I love the system with Cliff Kingsbury. We know that path has led to Kyler Murray being very productive and being a top 7 fantasy quarterback. So everything is there. I think Daniels' talent is just so tantalizing. And the weapons are there. He's got plenty of weapons. The running game, look, he could steal a lot from that as well with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. Like, he's not necessarily going to force checkdowns to those guys. He could also run it in the red zone, which is great. So, yeah, I think 500 yards rushing is easily there for him, Michelle, as you mentioned. But I also think he has a lot of TD upside overall in this offense. So I'm excited. I'm going to draft him in a lot of leagues now. Everyone's probably going to know that and chase him down, but you can't help but
His
be
price is
excited.
definitely increasing as we get closer
Yeah,
to
I
draft.
mean,
So
it could be this price at the end, right? When you're
yeah,
drafting like a couple days before the season starts, I would not be surprised if Jayden Daniels is high. I'm sure he's going to have a spike now that he's officially the starter. I don't know who would have thought he wasn't going to be the starter at this rate, but he's now a guy that hopefully you're drafting early or did some best ball drafts and you're able to get Jayden Daniels a little cheaper. But one guy you will not get cheap, and we'll break this down. I have Anthony Richardson ahead of Kyler Murray at 4, right at the beginning of tier 2. So 4-5 for me. You have Kyler Murray at 4 and Anthony Richardson at 6. So first of all, let's explain why we both have Kyler Murray pretty high.
yeah. So since 2020, even including coming off the ACL last year in 2023, including that season, he scored the 3rd most fantasy points per game among quarterbacks in that span, behind only Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. So, like, he's a great fantasy scorer. Prior to getting his injury in 2022, he was averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. In 2021, he was quarterback 4 in points per game. In 2020, he was quarterback 3 overall. He should be a top 5 quarterback yet again, especially giving him Marvin Harrison Jr., who looks already like he's going to be fantastic. The Cardinals defense looks like it's still going to be very stinky on paper, at least. So they're going to put up a lot of points. They're going to have to, the offense. So I think Kyler Murray is incredibly safe, plus has a super high upside. So that's why I have him over Anthony Richardson, who does have a high upside. Totally get that. We saw what he did in his 2 full games last year, and some half a games there. But I just think Kyler Murray's passing is so much safer, and he will also have some rushing yards as well.
Yeah, I liked Anthony Richardson's small sample size from last year. Now, there is a durability concern, but that's there with Kyler Murray, who missed time with a knee injury last year. But that's going to come with the territory with all these quarterbacks that run. Even Lamar has had some issues. The only one that you don't have to worry about is Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. That's probably why they aren't up there by themselves. But when you look at it, I think you just have to determine who has the biggest upside of this group. And that's how I kind of looked at it, right? That's why they're all in a tier. I think Andrew Richardson kind of hit the sweet spot for me. He has a little experience. I've seen what he can do. He's got the Shane Steichen offense. He's young. He's got enough weapons. That's why I liked him ahead of Kyler Murray. And then Murray's experience over Jayden Daniels with Marvin Harrison Jr. So it was really close for me, but I'm going to just tell you, give it away right now. This 4 through 6 range is what I'm going to attack more so than Allen, Hurts, and Jackson. I want to get some values at other position. If I can get one of these 3 guys, I'll be thrilled and go in a different direction. And that's why I have a bunch of guys down at tier 3, because I think the values start to seem very close to each other, especially with these pocket first throwing quarterbacks.
Yeah, we both have a very big tier 3. I have 6 quarterbacks in tier 3. You have 7 in tier 3. So we're expecting all of these quarterbacks to kind of just be very similar in production at the end of the year and what they give you in fantasy points per game. We'll talk about those quarterbacks in our next segment. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So we have a very similar tier 3. I mean, you can tell that we've been talking all off season together, right? And talking
Yeah.
because our rankings overall, they're not that crazy different, but we both have Stroud, CJ Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, and Brock Purdy in our tier 3. Now, not in the same order. Now, the only difference between like these actual guys in this tier, I have Jared Goff, you do not, and you have Caleb Williams, I do not. But this is how my tier 3 goes in order. CJ Stroud's at quarterback 8, then Joe Burrow, then Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Jared Goff. Yours goes Mahomes, Stroud, Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, Caleb Williams, Brock Purdy. So let's start with Stroud, right? CJ Stroud, I think, is the question mark here. He's going pretty early in drafts. I mean, you got to take him in the 4th, maybe 5th round at the latest. We both have him ranked as our quarterback 8. You do have Patrick Mahomes over him. I have Stroud over Mahomes. Why do you feel? I mean, I guess this is a silly question to ask, but why Mahomes over Stroud? And I guess I'm the one that has to give the real answer because that seems crazier.
Well, here's the first thing I'm going to say about Stroud Mahomes, that I think Stroud, you have to recognize, is a pocket passer. He's not going to give you a lot there from the running game. I mean, there's some occasional plays he's going to make, and he's going to probably get a touchdown or two, but that's not his game, right? He wants to sit back, and he doesn't need to run. I mean, he's got a lot of guys who can get the ball out quickly in this Texans offense. So I just think the Texans are going to be a better overall team. I don't know if you're just going to get a massive spike in touchdowns you're looking for. I think it'll be more spread around between Stephon Diggs and the other receivers now. You might have Joe Mixon pop in a few in the red zone as well. So I think that basically I don't know if Stroud can have the big spike we're looking for that everyone's looking at here to put him up there with Anthony Richardson. So that's why I have him at number 8. And Patrick Mahomes is a very hard guy to rank because if something all comes together with Patrick Mahomes, he can be the QB1 on the board. We know that. But again, are the Chiefs going to need him all that much to be that big numbers guy? I mean, they're a really dominant team. That was part of it last year. I mean, the one maybe upside here that might push him up, Rashee Rice doesn't look like he's going to be suspended. Xavier Worthy looks good. So if Hollywood Brown maybe gets healthy, okay, you're going to start these weapons. But to me, it's more Mahomes being weak to weak there, because there's going to be some shootouts that he's going to have to throw it up, but this team can also run the ball well in the red zone. And there's going to be some games where the defense just comes out. Chris Jones and company just whacks in, and Mahomes is just kind of protecting the lead in the second half. So the Chiefs might be too good sometimes for Patrick Mahomes at this point. Now, I know he can put up these numbers, 303 in a game, but the question is, does he need to? Does he want to? And he knows that the main part of the season, he's going to do that in the playoffs, right? So that's why you have to be careful. But I couldn't drop him, Michelle. I see yours at 10. I just couldn't put him I just couldn't do it. Put him that low. Like, he's the
It
best
is
quarterback in the
probably,
NFL. It's really
yeah.
hard because you know what his upside is.
Yeah, it's probably too low, right? He finished as the quarterback 12 in points per game last year. It was a miserable second half for fantasy for him. These are his fantasy finishes over the second half of the season: 29, 11, 15, 9, 16, 19, 17, 17, 21. Those are among quarterbacks. I mean, there's only 32 starting quarterbacks on any given week, and he was regularly below the middle, the average line there among these quarterbacks. He was amazing in fantasy all the years prior. So I do expect him to take a step forward. I love Xavier Worthy with him. It looks like you said Rashee Rice will be there. We'll see if Hollywood Brown can get healthy. But it's just hard. I like CJ Stroud. I like Joe Burrow over him. And then we talked about all the rushing quarterbacks prior that we like just because of all those rushing yards they're going to give us. But with Stroud, he's entering his second season. He was quarterback 9 in points per game in his rookie season, but he was way better with Tank Dell in the lineup than without. He was averaging over 20 fantasy points per game from weeks 1 through 12 before Tank Dell got hurt very early in week 13. And now you add in Stephon Diggs as well. This offense is humming in the preseason. I think Stroud's going to have a really nice season. My biggest issue is he's not. If I have him at quarterback 8, then I don't want to take him at quarterback 4, right? Where he's going. So I think he's being drafted too early, but I do think he still has a very nice season.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, the other thing I'll say, Michelle, it's okay if you have another good quarterback with Patrick Mahomes. I think we've been so locked into you take Patrick Mahomes, you started every week, no matter what. If you're in a one QB league, you may not do that. You might actually play the matchups if there's a tough defense that you don't really want to put him out there.
It's
I'm
going to
not
be
saying
really
you're going to.
hard, though, to take
Yeah,
the
it's
quarterback
hard. That's the thing.
the third round
You're
pick,
just
and then
gonna have to
also
live
use
it.
another pick.
Yeah, I mean that's the hard thing. It's like you're going to play it, then you're going to feel bad if you bench him, and then he explodes for 300. And he's like, "What did I do? I benched Patrick Mahomes for this other tier guy that was a little bit behind him because he had a better matchup." So it's a tough situation. I think you get stuck a little bit playing Mahomes, but I'd much rather have him where we have him down there. It's 7 to 10. I do not want to take him anywhere near the top 5. Now Joe Burrow is interesting. Like, again, another guy that's throwing the pocket now. I think it's just very hard. Well, I'll be honest with you, to separate Mahomes, Stroud, and Burrow because they kind of can come by points the same way. They all have pretty good weapons, and they're all going to be in pretty high volume at some point. So I don't know. I think Joe Burrow to me is kind of the medium guy that I'm looking at here, but I don't see him maybe having the ceiling as Mahomes and Stroud. I think he has a high floor. So I think that's why I have those two guys ahead of Joe Burrow. Because again, I think he's a little bit capped in relation to those guys and what they can do with their offensive weapons.
Yeah, so I have Joe Burrow at quarterback 9, ahead of Mahomes, ahead of guys like Jordan Love, who are, going up kind of around Burrow or ahead of him. So Burrow, I mean, I know last year is just kind of a throwaway year with him coming with injury and then getting injured as soon as he was getting hot again. I will say I found it really interesting. His 2022 season would have actually ranked second among quarterbacks in points per game last year. So only Josh Allen last year would have scored more than what he had
Mm-hmm.
in 2022 with his 22 points per game. It was a down year for quarterbacks last year for sure. Hopefully that picks up. So I expect Joe Burrow to get back to his 2022 status as long as, pay Jamar Chase. Hopefully he's out there. T. Higgins is looking like he's back. He's looking great. They have other young weapons they're utilizing. And they did get rid of Joe Mixon. And I know we like Zach Moss and others like Chase Brown, but I don't think they're going to be able to lean on the run maybe as much as they were able to in the past. Even then, it wasn't even that much. So I really like Joe Burrow a lot this year. Again, his price is a little pricey for a guy that does not run all that often. You're not going to get the rushing yards. You're not going to get many rushing touchdowns. But I still think he's a top 10 fantasy quarterback this year.
Yeah, I mean, you make an excellent point because what defines a QB1, QB2 overall on the board is different from season to season. So ideally in fantasy you want a bunch of guys that are scoring a ton and there's not much separation. It makes decisions harder, but then it makes it easier in the same respect because you're going to end up with a good value here, right? And maybe yet again why advocating for superflex and 2 QB might be the way to go as much as possible because of all these options. But you're right, the scoring overall is going to be higher, and that means the threshold for a guy such as Jordan Love is going to be higher to clear to get up there. So that's the bottom line: is you're not just looking for, okay, is this guy going to finish this spot in the final production, or is he going to finish above this guy or below another guy, right? That's what you really have to think about. And I think Jordan Love comes into that category where you have Burrow healthy, so that can push down Jordan Love. You got Richardson in the mix we talked about, then you had Daniels. So that alone could just push Jordan Love, right, from a potential QB 6 or 7 down to where I have him at QB 10, you have him at QB 12. So I think you just have to keep that in mind. But I think Jordan Love comes down to earth a little bit. I don't say he's a total bust, but I think he's not worth the hype he's getting to go much higher. And I think his market has kind of been adjusted to reflect that.
Yeah, we both talked about the Jordan Love. We think he's going to come down a little bit. His efficiency in the second half of the year
Yeah.
was insane. Even then, wasn't killing it so much for fantasy in many of those weeks. Now you were brave and you put rookie quarterback Caleb Williams in tier 3. I have him in tier 4, but you are higher on him as your quarterback 12. So you expect him to finish as a quarterback 1 this year. Is it because of preseason, what you've seen from him, or what's making you so confident?
Yeah, it really comes down to our choices, and I'll explain why I have Caleb Williams ahead of Jared Goff. You can explain why you have Goff ahead of Caleb Williams. Now, I like Caleb Williams because the weaponry is good, and I needed to see one more piece of the puzzle. I needed to see what Rome Odunze would do, and man, he was awesome. Like he had 2 touches, made 2 explosive plays. One was on a rush, one that was like a 40-plus yard gain in the passing game. So they're definitely going to use that. And I examined this a little bit more. This team is going to be a pretty heavy 11 usage team in terms of personnel. So you're going to see a lot of Keenan Allen with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Like if you put those 3 guys at a pass catching back, the level will be Andre Swift, Cole Kmet. He has good chemistry. He made a nice little bootleg play to get Kmet going. This is plenty of weapons, right? And he's just an improviser playmaker. So if you're looking for that guy that is the kind of the Patrick Mahomes type, is just going to put up numbers like a young version of Mahomes, and his team is still trying to figure it out and put it all together defensively, you look at Caleb Williams. I'm just impressed. I think his head is on straight. He can also rush for touchdowns. We've seen that too, that they're going to use him near the goal line because, again, Swift is a little dude. They're not going to trust Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson. So you're going to see a lot of maybe designed plays for Williams to run in scores here. So I really like that. I mean, Jared Goff is fine, but he can be a bit boring, right? If you have Jared Goff, you're hoping the splits all work out and everything's your favor. Now, he was productive, but when you look at it to deeper, he was more out of this top 12, top 14 QBs when he was scoring last season.
Yeah, I think the reason why I like Goff up here in tier 3 is because he's so easy to know when to play and when not, right? Like if you take Jared Goff, you're getting him late A, you probably get him in the 10th, 11th round. Like take another quarterback because you can only play him at home. You can't play him away.
Yeah.
But he did finish as the quarterback 7 last year, quarterback 16 in fantasy points per game. So not as consistent as his overall finish. But again, it's because of the away games. He averaged over 20 fantasy points per game at home. So that's why I like him. I will say I have Caleb Williams right at the top of my tier 4. So it's not like we're that different on him. I have him at quarterback 12. You have him at 14. One last guy to hit on here just really quickly. We both have Brock Purdy in our tier 3. We've been talking him up. The big reason we like Brock Purdy is because you can get him in the 9th round and we have him in the same tier. So we expect him to score around the same as Mahomes and Stroud and Burrow and Love and Dak Prescott, all guys going so much earlier. So that's why we love Purdy's price and his value this year. We're going to get into our tier 4 guys and finish up our quarterback rankings right after the break.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun to see if we have any deep sleepers that you should be mining for, and we will have that right after the break. All right. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, that's right, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook, and you'll get a chance to also have access to NFL Sunday Ticket. Yep, free 3-week trial to check it out, plus those $5 there that you can put in play. Visit FanDuel.com, check it out. NFL futures are up now. Soon we will have NFL regular season games only at FanDuel.com. All right, Michelle, let us close the show looking at our last tier of quarterbacks. And these are just guys we're going to throw some darts at. I mean, really, it's 3 tiers, but we've broken it down here from like 14 to 25. These are the guys that you get outside of maybe 12-team leagues starter consideration. Now, another strategy you can employ, and you can even do it with those guys in the previous tier, is you can grab a couple of these guys, play the matchups a little bit. It's a little on the dangerous side here if you want to play that, because you could really get them wrong, and you could just estimate defenses being better or worse than they really are. So that's something to keep in mind. But I also don't think it's a bad strategy. Everyone looks at streaming quarterbacks trying to pick up one every week. I like having 2 or 3 here from this tier that you can play and really maximize where you're not forcing a guy into a bad matchup.
Yeah, and there are some valuable quarterbacks back here that you can get and you can maybe hit on. Like, again, I have Caleb Williams as my quarterback 14 in tier 4, but he has high upside this year. I'll say I'm much higher on 2 guys than you are, and I think they have really high upside as well, and that's Daniel Jones and Deshaun Watson. It's not fun to say those names, and I know like actual NFL play hasn't been good, but I have Daniel Jones at quarterback 15. And honestly, like I know this last preseason game may have scared some folks off because of his interceptions, but like I personally loved seeing him out there. He was running, which was key. It does not look like he's scared of that ACL tear at all. He took off and ran and did a good job getting close to a first down there with a good 10-yard run. And his deep balls were on point. I mean, they were. So like those are one thing that we know he can do. He's going to make bad decisions and throw interceptions, but I loved him hyper targeting Malik Neighbors. Then he can use Darius Slayton as a wide receiver too, which we saw worked out. Now that Slayton's not the top guy, he actually has some space to work, right? And they connected on a deep touchdown. But I mean, we're 1 year removed from Daniel Jones being the quarterback 10 in fantasy, despite throwing only 15 passing touchdowns. And it's because he had over 700 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Devin Singletary can't handle all the goal line work. That's the only running back they have. He's too tiny to handle all of it. Daniel Jones is going to get a lot of rushing touchdowns, a lot of rushing yards. And then he hit Malik Neighbors deep and Darius Slayton.
Yeah, I'm just worried about Daniel Jones keeping his job, to be quite honest. Like,
who's going to take it? Drew Lock? No.
Well, it's going to be like the Russell Wilson situation. They're just going to start not Daniel Jones. And they're just going to say, it's done. We're waving the white flag on Daniel Jones. We're going to move on. And look, those 2 interceptions he threw were hideous against the Texans. They were just terrible decisions. Yeah, so I don't know if he's going to stay on the field all that much longer. Now, again, Drew Lock is not a great option, but if Daniel Jones turns over the ball and makes those decisions and he's rusty, he's not going to be on the field a lot. So that's my concern here, that Daniel Jones can easily be benched, and I think that's kind of where I have that reflected in the rankings at 23. I just don't – I don't know. I just feel like I don't want to go there with Daniel Jones and be in for that roller coaster ride. Maybe that's part of it. Same thing with Deshaun Watson. I get why you like him and why fantasy managers could be attracted to him, and he could easily score just like Jones where you have him up in the rankings. But it's just me, a personal preference. I just don't like living too dangerously there. I think there's a lot of safer options here that we look at. Now, the 2 old guys I want to mention here, just Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, and Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think I'm starting to like Stafford more and more in relation to these guys, and maybe not too much or any of Rodgers. And Kirk Cousins, I like a little bit more than Stafford, but I'm also a little bit worried with his injury history.
Yeah, our Kirk Cousins ranking has me a little nervous. You have him at quarterback 14. I am all the way down at quarterback 17. That's probably too low. And if you really like made me pick between Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins or Deshaun Watson and Kirk Cousins, I don't know if I am brave enough to do it. I won't be surprised if that's why I have him at these rankings, that Daniel Jones outscores him, Deshaun Watson outscores him. The comfortability and like the safeness is very, very dangerous there. But with Kirk Cousins, he killed it last year and he's been killing it with Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson. He's been a really, really solid fantasy quarterback. He was quarterback 7 in fantasy points per game last year. But now you take away Justin Jefferson from him, right? Drake London's a good wide receiver, but can he be a true wide receiver 1? He does not have the separation that Jefferson has at all. He's changing teams, coming off an Achilles tear. Like, That's a lot of things to hope for here for Kirk Cousins. That's why I have him lower, but I am probably a little bit too low on him for sure.
Yeah, these are just guys with just enough question marks, right? Whether their age or health or something that's going on, that they could really go either way. And that's why they're kind of in the muddled middle, like deep middle, I should say. That you start not feeling comfortable taking one of these guys. That's why you take two, right? Take two of these guys and see where you're at there. Now, Justin Herbert really hurts. Like, I almost thought about putting him lower. I'm just going to say it's just looked rough for Justin Herbert. I'm at 20. I'm at 21. Like, this is bad. Like, remember his rookie year where he was? And now he's hurt with the foot injury. They're in a run heavy offense. The receivers have not looked good here. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if Justin Herbert's going to be playable very often this season, the way the state of the Chargers offense is going.
Yeah, he's been the quarterback 17 in fantasy in each of the last 2 seasons. Now, he missed some games last year, was quarterback 11 in points per game, but a lot of the games were just really, really gross. He didn't do a whole lot. And now you're telling me you take away all of his weapons and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Gerald Everett and Austin Eckler. That's like all of his targets. And then you go to a run heavy offensive coordinator and Greg Roman. Then you deal with a foot injury in the preseason. So, like, who knows if you're going to be able to utilize your running abilities to start the year? It could start slow like Burrow last year. So many things against him that he's that low, but that's a brutal ranking for Justin Herbert. And like, I hope we're wrong about it because the NFL is just more fun when Justin Herbert's good and there's better quarterbacks out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's one guy I put ahead of him that is going to shock some people that I really like, and I'm starting to warm up to. And this could be a breakout guy. I'll just give away that. I'm going to just tell you, I have no interest in getting one of three quarterbacks: Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, or Geno Smith. I do not want any of these guys. It's just not that exciting to me. This guy is a little exciting. I'm all the way up at 19. I know I'm nuts. It's Will Levis. I do like this offense quite a bit. I mean, Calvin Ridley, he's had good chemistry there. He's got weapons all over the field. I think they'll use the backs well in the passing game. And Levis can move around a little bit and do his thing there. He's an underrated athlete. I think he'll have DeAndre Hopkins back sooner rather than later. While Hopkins has been hurt, by the way, Treylon Burks is doing some things in camp. So all of a sudden you can have Burks, Ridley, Okonkwo, all these guys coming together. The Titans really invest in their offensive line. I love the Brian Callahan type style of offense here where you look at what happened with Joe Burrow with Callahan. So there's that potential. And look, is this Kenny Pickett 2.0 or is this Joe Burrow 2.0? Like, it's going to be somewhere in between. And that's where I'm really struggling with this. But I'm going to lean toward Will Levis. He has bad taste in mayonnaise, but I do like his ability here. I think he's in the right offense to break out. I think that's the Titans in general. I think this also goes from like a 55% kind of, I'd say, rushing type offense to one that's going to throw 60+% of the time. I really think it's going to be very prolific here, and the Titans, I think, are going to have some defensive struggles as well. So Will Levis is my so-called breakout sleeper here at number 19.
What's funny is I think Will Levis's job is not safe. Like, if he starts to struggle, then they actually have Mason Rudolph back there that I think is much better than Drew Lock at this point in their careers to kind of take over for the rest of the year until they figure out what to do next season at their quarterback. But Will Levis stunk last year, right? Like, he came out his NFL debut, threw 4 touchdowns. That was fantastic. But then had 4 touchdowns the final 8 starts, right? He had the lowest completion percentage in the NFL among 32 qualified quarterbacks at 58.4. He averaged 11.3 fantasy points per game in starts last season. That ranked 27th among 32 quarterbacks with 8+ starts. That was ahead of only Bryce Young, Mac Jones, Kenny Pickett, and Ryan Tannehill. I get things changed for him, but I can't see that big of a jump. Like, I couldn't put him ahead of quarterback 24. Like, I still wouldn't even want him to be my second quarterback in a super flex league. I would maybe take a chance on him as my third quarterback. That's as high as I'll go on it.
Yeah, I just have to say, I mean, a lot of things blew up for the Titans and a lot of things blew up for the Panthers. So I feel confident that Will Levis and Bryce Young are going to do some things that are going to surprise people this season. And again, it's not like they're void of weapons. And so I'm going to just keep an eye on him. I might be the only person seeing who's a better QB2 this season, Levis or Young. But I'm just excited. I just want more guys to put up numbers to give us better options because I don't want to be going down and looking at Gardner Minshew and Sam Darnold. I do not want to start them this season.
No.
So I'm hoping some of these young guys come through.
Yeah, absolutely. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers. Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow discussing our running back rankings. We'll get to our wide receiver rankings on Wednesday and Thursday, and then our tight end rankings on Friday. It'll be a great week. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.